Well, this story is definitely in the western suburbs, and it's a little bit further back than today, quite a number of years actually. When I began secondary school in 1960, which is a very long time ago, I think my world began to expand in a way that it had never done before. I was 12 years old, and I went from going to school across the road to suddenly having to catch 2 buses to go to school, because I went to St Aloysius Girls' School in North Melbourne. Now, I had very rarely travelled on the bus before. There was no need. So I caught one bus from the top of my street into Footscray, and then I caught another bus, which was known as the hospital bus, from Hopkins Street in Footscray through to North Melbourne. That was a big adventure for me, but it was the first of many such, and quite a big expansion. The bus was so called the hospital bus because it finished up, by the time it had travelled all that distance, going past approximately 6 hospitals, which were all in that vicinity. So it was never called by its right name, it was just the hospital bus. So we would all pile onto the bus in the morning. It was always a very, very full bus. It carried girls from St Aloysius, it carried students from University High School, it carried uni students from Melbourne Uni, it carried workers for all the hospitals in the area. It was really very full and very noisy. After we'd been at the school, or after I'd been at the school for about 3.5 years, the bus company, in its wisdom, decided that they needed to put a special bus on in the afternoon, just for us, because there were, so many of us that we just cluttered up the bus with all our bags and noise and everything else. So the bus would pull up at about 3:45, and we would all gradually pile on. The younger ones managed to get on the bus first because they were usually let out a little bit earlier to allow them a seat on this bus. The bus had to be seen to be believed. I might tell you it was an old bus which looked as though it could have been pensioned off and brought back just for us. It had 2 bench seats, one on either side of the bus. It also had 2 long metal bars that were attached to the ceiling. Now, that was for the people who didn't get a seat. If you were lucky and did get a seat, that was fine, but that didn't very often happen to me because I was one of the later ones getting on the bus, and too bad. But my problem was I had great difficulty reaching this bar. Of course, being of short stature, that's what happens. So we'd all pile on the bus. Now, I must tell you that the driver was the biggest grump that I have ever come across. I don't know whether he'd been in trouble with the bus company, but it seemed like this was his punishment. He hated the noise. Now, as an adult, I can understand that there is a lot of noise when you've got about 50 or more girls piled onto a bus, but he just did not want to be there. So we'd pile onto the bus with all our bags, and he'd shout at us and tell us to be quiet, and then he'd tell us to put all those bags down the back. They're just cluttering up the path. So we'd do all that, and of course then we'd get back to talking and laughing. And I mean, what else would we do? We'd come out of school after a very full day, and we were just delighted to be out in the open again and have a bit of freedom. Anyway, he just didn't like it. One thing which eventually brought him undone was the fact that he was an erratic driver. That's the best way to describe it, because we would frequently find ourselves with the bus coming to a really sharp stop. He didn't believe in gradually coming to a stop. He put on the brakes. So this happened frequently, and we didn't take a lot of notice. After a while, we got a little bit tired of the bus would stop suddenly all the bags would go catapulting down to the front of the bus. And if you had very foolishly left your bag open, you would find books and sports uniforms and basketballs and all sorts of things flying through the air to the front of the bus, as well as all the girls who were lucky enough to hold on or lost their balance, and people like me who kept the momentum going even though the bus had stopped, and so I'd be flying through the air frequently up to the front of the bus. On one occasion, and one occasion only, I did manage to take hold of one of these bars. Unfortunately, holding on to the bar with whichever hand you had meant, on that occasion, that my feet went out from underneath me and my shoulder was very severely wrenched. So I'd stopped trying to hold on after that. Not long after that, I was running to the front of the bus, tripped over one of the bags and went flying through the air and landed on my knees. As I stood up, I happened to catch the driver's face in the rearview mirror, and he was silently laughing at all of us. He thought it was wonderful. So after we all gathered ourselves up and moved up to the back, I told the others very quietly, so he wouldn't hear me, what was going on. We decided over the next few days to watch him and see if he was doing it deliberately. Sure enough, what happened? He'd drive erratically and then pull up very sharp, and all this mayhem would take place, and he was having a wonderful time. It was like he was getting back at us for the noise we were making. The next day at school, we decided we needed to do something about this. We were going to complain. So that night, we all complained to our parents. Now, back in the 60s, you know, you really had to put up with a lot more as a child than you do now. We weren't happy about it, but we usually put up with it. But on this occasion, it was so protracted that we thought we've got to do something. So I told Mum, and Mum said, "Oh, it can't be that bad, really, is it? Just put up with it." Well, that didn't go over very well at all. The next day at school, most of the other girls who'd complained to their parents had had the same response. So we thought, well, we'll speak to the teachers. Well, the teachers said, "They're your elders. You must respect your elders." And the old chestnut from one of the nuns, "Just offer it up." Well, that went over like a lead balloon. So we got together and we decided that we had to do something about this. Over lunchtime, a few of us in the higher classes got together to just figure this problem out. We had one of the Year 12 or Matric girls with us, and she said, "There's just one thing I'll say first of all. Don't do anything that might backfire on you. Be careful what you do decide to do." So there were various suggestions made, you know, ring the bus company and tell them, write a letter to the bus company, but that just didn't seem to do it. So these suggestions went on and on, some of them more and more bizarre than ever. And then finally, this Year 12 girl, whose name was Denise and whom we all loved because she was so much fun, she was just a lovely person to be with. She sat there and thought about it and she said, "I think I've got it. The fare on the bus for most of us is 6p. Now, most people would get on the bus and hand over a 6p silver piece, which was really quite small. For those who don't know, it was the equivalent of a 5-cent piece. But, she said, and we were all waiting, legal tender is sixpence. Now, legal tender can be reached by handing over 6 pennies, which are a lot bigger and a lot heavier than 1 sixpence, or even better, 12 halfpennies. Well, there was absolute consensus. We were delighted. So the message went around that afternoon, tomorrow on the bus in the afternoon, make sure you have copper coins for the fare. The next day, some people forgot to bring their copper coins. So they went off to the tuck shop. And Mrs. Hooper, who ran the tuck shop, was a bit alarmed to see all her copper coins disappearing in exchange for sixpences. And after a while she said, girls, what's happening to these copper coins? Why are you taking all my copper coins? One very humorous girl said, oh, it's a science experiment, Mrs. Hooper. So she didn't ask any more questions after that. In the afternoon, we lined up outside the bus, expectantly waiting to see what the outcome would be. So the younger ones, some of them were already on, and we all lined up very quietly, very well behaved, waiting to take our turn getting onto the bus. As I walked up the steps of the bus, with my coins in my hand, I was so excited about seeing the outcome. As I got up to the bus driver and handed him my coins, his face was incredibly puzzled. He didn't know what was going on. I went and took my seat, which I managed to get that time, and all these other girls kept getting on. More coins, more coins. At some point, the little receptacle with the coins in it just gave up. There was no more room. So he had to hunt around on the floor and in his own bag to see what he could put them in. He did find a bag, which was good, but what wasn't good was the fact that this bag could not be closed or even tied shut. And he had no way of holding it because there was so much in it. So we all sat on the bus very quietly with bated breath, waiting for the outcome. He began to drive very slowly, muttering to himself with this bag leaning against the side of the wall. He drove very sedately that day. Very, very sedately. When we got back to school the next day, the humour, the laughter, the excitement that had been bottled up while sitting in that bus just exploded as we shared with each other how wonderful it felt. I have to tell you, we were very proud that we had achieved that outcome without having any problem at all. There was no blood spilt. Everything was fine. It didn't make a perfect driver out of him, but he never drove as fast or as erratically again. Well, not while most of us were on the bus anyway. And there's just one question that remains unanswered. How was he received when he got back to the depot that night with his excess of copper coins? Thank you.